Hello, so I just came from Grace Street Community Garden and we were learning about native plants. And so I got some plants from there, and one of them is the native plant yarrow. And so in order to propagate it, you're gonna want to remove the bottom leaves and cut it at a 45-degree angle. And you can put it in a glass of water at first because it will be less struggle for the plant to grow the roots. And also when you're cutting the leaves or maybe some extra branches or that are branching off of it, you want to pay attention to the energy of the plant. So when I say energy, that doesn't typically mean like magical energy, as some people may get confused by, but everything has energy, and the direction, the flow of the energy of the plant. So we want more energy to go into the rooting process versus the flowers. I could cut off the flowers, but I don't want to. So I just removed some of the branches to make that, and paid attention to the natural flow of which direction these yarrow are growing in. And I put them in a glass jar. You want to have them in indirect light because the glass can absorb the heat and overheat the plant, which we don't want. So I have that yarrow, and this is lemongrass. So what I did for this one was, you see how the top of this one has the leaf on it. The only reason why I kept that is because these mason jars are pretty big, so it doesn't kind of fall into the mason jar. But for this one, I cut off the bottom end of it, so because it was kind of like scarred over, so you can bring in some water and nutrients up from it. And I also cut off the top like you kind of would do with an onion. It's almost like the same shape as an onion here. So I knew intuitively that is how this plant is going to grow, and it's going to sprout up from the top and grow like how an onion would, and it's going to root on the bottom. So lemongrass actually is not commonly known to be native to California or even either any of the Americas. It actually is documented as being native to Malaysia, and it is often used in cuisines in India. A grass that would be more commonly known to be native to North America would be sweetgrass, which does have a sweet and slightly lemony type smell to it. But this actually opens up a discussion on plant identification and identity. So during this native plant class, I learned that there are strawberries that are actually native to California. They are commonly known as woodland strawberries, and it opened up a discussion for me because I also know that they say that strawberries are actually native to Egypt as well. So what I learned in native plant class is that birds, they eat these different plants, and then after they basically poop them out, the seeds get spread, and a lot of different birds, they migrate from one continent to another. So that could be a possible reason why it's documented that strawberries, this species of strawberry, is native to both Egypt and California. A bird that would be known to been in ancient Egypt would have been a goose. And goose do eat berries such as strawberries, and they do migrate from one continent to another. So that could be why it is documented as wild strawberries or woodland strawberries being native to both continents. Also, we have to remember that in early ancient history, a lot of documentation was lost or changed along the way, and so sometimes there can be errors in plant identification. Another thing that I wanted to mention is that Native American is not just one nation. Native American is many different nations, and the Native Americans came together or united as a form of resistance and preservation of their culture. But we have to keep in mind that each nation has their own different culture, that it's not all just one thing. Typically, what the different native nations would do is they would trade medicines, trade plants, trade foods, and all different sorts of things. But what I learned from anthropology is that also, even though they may have learned about a new type of medicine or had been given a medicine from a different nation, from a different part of what is now called America, they were very careful to not incorporate fully the traditional ways of the other nation's medicine, and they would incorporate it into their own nation's culture in their own way. This is also why it's very sacred when someone gives you the medicine from their region, because typically those medicines are sacred to those people, and it is an honor to receive the medicine and learn a little bit about their ways and become a community through the trade. This is a process in humanity that is not just in Native American culture, but in all different cultures as they migrated and learned about different people's cultures and incorporated some into their own by influence. So while it's important to preserve your culture, there's also an openness in building community together. So typically you would want to use plant clippers. I don't have that. I just have regular scissors. But just like how, let's say if a doctor was doing surgery, you would want it to be sanitized. So you want this to be sanitized as well before you cut the plant or prune it. And you would use, it's better to use rubbing alcohol because it has a higher percentage or concentration of ethyl alcohol, but I didn't have rubbing alcohol, so I just used sanitizer, and it will tell you the percentage. Usually it's like about 60%. See, this one's 62%. So this can work as well too, to sanitize your scissors, and then you just take a paper towel or maybe a cotton ball and clean it off, and don't put your fingers on it like I just did, because you're going to be introducing bacteria. So the purpose of sanitizing it is so that the plant doesn't pick up pathogens such as bacteria, viruses, and fungi. So rosemary is another one that is not typically documented as being native to North America or even South America. It is historically documented to be native to the Mediterranean area. When this plant was introduced to us by one of the instructors, she explained to us that she had learned from a Lakota woman to use a thread to turn the rosemary into a wreath, and that also the wreath was a symbol of protection and ward off negative energy. From what I know about Lakota tradition, traditionally they would have used sweetgrass, and that would have been braided and perhaps maybe used and created into a wreath. So the question goes, why would Lakota teach as a tradition to turn rosemary into a wreath? Well, there's some possible different reasons for this. During colonization, they not only brought over their different crops and different plants, but these different crops or different plants, even medicinal plants, were spiritual to them in various ways. So in the Mediterranean, in both Greece and Roman culture, rosemary was known for clarity and to help with focus. So in Greece, they would wear crowns of rosemary on their heads to help them during their studies. Also in Roman culture, they also made crowns of rosemary because they had the Catholic tradition. So in Catholicism, wearing a crown of medicinal plant such as rosemary may have been worn by a bride, and it also may be to honor a deceased loved one, and it also may have been worn by a saint, such as the Virgin Mary, because rosemary is also known as a symbol of purity. And another symbol of the Virgin Mary is the rose. So that could have been why this plant in particular could have been called rosemary. Also, what we know that happened during colonization was the Jesuit priests came over and indoctrinated or tried to indoctrinate different Native Americans. So what I'm thinking may have possibly happened is that maybe this Lakota woman in particular, in her story and her ancestors' tradition, they may have made a wreath of rosemary and hung it up as protection because it's a symbol of divinity and a way to protect themselves culturally from being hurt physically or seen as a rebel from these different Jesuits. Spiritually, from my ancestors' bloodline, in preserving spiritual heritage, the rosemary reminded me of the crown of thorns. And the red thread, after being explained that it represents love and passion, also reminded me of blood and sacrifice. So in honor of the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, who in my spirituality we call the Way, I made a symbolic representation of the crown of thorns. Within the spirit of my own spiritual preservation, this is a symbol of divinity to me, a symbol of protection, and also an honor to represent my own very God.
Usually you would want to do a soft wood cutting. So here, for example, this is soft, and you would root it from there. But these ones are hardwood cutting. So this is the more woodsy part of the plant. However, it can still root from the woodsy part, just like how a tree would. So I just cut it in the 45-degree angle, and you want to immediately put it in the water. I removed the leaves at the bottom again so that the energy can go more into the rooting. but you don't want to remove all the leaves because the leaves help pull in the sun so it could photosynthesize and create the food and sugars that it needs. Now this water, I was gonna do tap water because tap water, it does have minerals in it naturally, except now they're kind of messing with our tap water, and I noticed immediately the tap water here smelled very potent of chlorine, like so much that it smelled like a pool, and I didn't want to harm my plants, so I used filtered water. You could add in your own plant food if you want, but it could be fine like that. Another plant that I forgot to show you guys, so this is called Clevelandii salvia. It's a type of sage that is native to Southern California or northern, like Baja California, along the coast. You could identify it by its shape. So these would be like the bottom leaves because the top leaves with the flowers look different. But you see how it separates into two and then goes up, separates into two and goes up. That's another way to identify this type of plant. So this, you can make it into a tea, and it gives you that kind of warm blanket type of sleep. You could also use it for coughs and stuff, but typically, if I was to make this, I would probably make this into a tea for relaxation. It really relaxes the nerves and gives you a very restful sleep. Unlike the mugwort, on the other hand, mugwort is gonna give you like intense dreams and stuff. This one is not gonna make you typically dream like mugwort would. This is gonna give you a nice like warm blanket type sleep. And then this here, this is mugwort. And so again, I paid attention and see how it's kind of like curving of the flow of the plant. And so I cut off some extra branching off of it so that it can go with its natural flow of what it's wanting to do here with the 45-degree angle cut. So mugwort is good for women for their uterus or bladder issues, but you would never ever want to take this if you were pregnant, as you should be careful with any herbs if you're if you're pregnant or lactating. Some people, it is commonly known for like giving very potent dreams, but that is because of the phytochemicals in it affect the chemicals in your brain. Lemongrass is also going to help you relax. Some people make lemongrass tea. It has some of the same qualities as the lemon balm in it, and this is gonna make you have a more pleasant mood as well, because a part of it also is the aromatherapy factor, or your olfactory system, in which you're like smelling and sensing the chemical components of these plants. And here, yarrow. It can be made into a poultice, which is when you like kind of smash the plant up and put it on a wound. It will help your a wound to clot its blood, and it will also help with healing.